So, dear colleagues, let's start our session, our last session of the conference. We have two parallel sessions running right now. I'm going to speak Russian, so those who need interpretation, please use the respective service. But all our panelists will make their presentations in English. So whatever language you prefer, you are much welcome. Добрый вечер, добрый день, уважаемые, доброе утро, если у нас есть какие-то участники из Северной Америки. Добро пожаловать на последнюю сессию конференции «Жизнь в Кыргызстане». Большое спасибо за ваше участие. Значит, наша сессия, она на тему «Вызовы местного развития». У нас есть 3 презентации. Сначала Аида Мусаева сделает презентацию по вопросу альтернативы местного экономического развития в Кыргызской республике. Потом Нодир Djanibekov сделает презентацию, его совместную презентацию с господином Тадjиевым. Детерминанты кооперации крестьян или фермеров, как хотите, в управлении водными ресурсами в Казахстане и Узбекистане. И затем Madina Junussova сделает презентацию по их совместной работе с Aigul Bemishevой о моногородах в Казахстане, вызовы и возможности развития. Если позволите, я коротко представлю наших спикеров. Аида Мусаева, она учится в аспирантуре университета города Печ в Венгрии. В настоящее время она уже находится на стадии финализации своей работы и проводит полевые исследования. Сейчас физически находится в Баткене, это Южный Кыргызстан. Наш следующий спикер, Нодир Djanibekov, является исследователем в отделе сельскохозяйственной политики, я уже на русский не буду пытаться перевести, Leibniz Institute of Agricultural Development and Transition Economies, IAMO. Я думаю, что все, кто занимается сельскохозяйственной экономикой, сельскохозяйственным развитием, они все знают этот институт в нашей части света, по крайней мере. Он получил свой PhD в университете Бонна, в Германии, ну а изначально он работал в Узбекистане в различных исследовательских проектах. И он очень много пишет по вопросам земельных реформ, трудовых отношений в сельском хозяйстве и так далее. Очень много интересных публикаций мы знаем. Я также должен заметить, что Нодир – это добрый друг нашего университета, и мы сотрудничаем уже на протяжении многих лет. Третий наш спикер – это Madina Junussova. Она просто сотрудник нашего университета, является Research Fellow в нашем институте государственного управления и политики. Она закончила программу PhD по государственной политике в университете Карлтона в Канаде и в настоящее время очень активно проводит исследования в различных сферах, включая городское развитие, местное экономическое развитие, рациональное использование местных ресурсов и так далее. Я думаю, что у нас очень хорошая, сбалансированная панель со спикерами, находящимися в Баткене, в Халле в Германии и в Алматы. Регламент у нас очень простой. У нас 90 минут на всю сессию, значит, по 30 минут на пейпер. Где-то я прошу удержаться в рамках 20 минут с презентацией и оставить, скажем, 10 минут на дискуссию. Для дискуссии у нас есть следующие возможности. Вы можете, скорее всего, у нас не очень много участников, что создает для нас комфортную ситуацию. Вы можете вот в разделе Q&A, где вопросы, вы можете, конечно, полностью написать вопрос, или вы можете написать, что хочу задать вопрос, и наша сотрудница Мария, которая помогает с организацией, она вас подключит так, что у вас будет возможность устно задать этот вопрос. Значит, мы в основном постараемся организовать дискуссию так, чтобы полностью обсудим один пейпер, потом перейдем к другому пейперу. Так что я буду стараться следить за регламентом, и не обижайтесь, буду напоминать, если время истекает. Спасибо большое. На этом, я думаю, вступительная часть заканчивается, и я бы хотел передать слово Аиде. Пожалуйста.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, dear panelists, my name is Aida, as mentioned above. I'm right now PhD candidate at the University Pecs. PhD training is chosen my topic. I have just expanded my master thesis, which I have graduated from Republic of Korea, South Korea. And now I am currently pursuing my PhD in Europe. That's why I have chosen Korean model and European. And as I am from rural areas, it's very close to my heart, rural development, local development. In this regard, I am doing my research in this area. The outline of my topic, introduction, what is local economic development? In Korean model, as I mentioned already, it's Sema Lundong, Republic of Korea's Korean rural development model, and I will explain the socio-economic background, process, and effect. And European model is known LEADER, and also socio-economic background, process, and effect. Right now, in Kyrgyzstan, last year, the first Korean-led initiative is known My Village initiative, already launched. I will touch upon this, then I will conclude. This is my, I want to say that this is my theoretical part, and I will present this. Right now I am in Kyrgyzstan. I came late September, sorry. And I hope in January I will finish my empirical results. I will give results. So first of all, what is local economic development? Until 80s, this methodology applied to economically disadvantaged territories to attract new businesses to relocate from centers to peripheries. However, the mid-90s, this led focused on the self-help activities through the initiative of local stakeholders, the government agency, business, and community, to prosper and generate growth in particular area. And another emphasis of this led on the importance of indigenous and endogenous development. Indigenous, where we understand homegrown, embedded locally, and endogenous, we understand bottom-up approach. However, in this model, in this theory, the exogenous or top-down approach neglected in this area. The paper proposes my research proposed alternatives for Kyrgyz Republic, which applied endogenous, bottom-up, and exogenous top-down approach to develop rural areas. They are Korean Sema Lundong and European LEADER models. Objective of my study is to expand opportunities and give recommendations to improve the quality of life rural areas of Kyrgyz Republic through the local development based on alternative models. Our research question is, what is the main differences and similarities of the European LEADER model and Korean Sema Lundong schemes of local development? Are these role models applicable to Kyrgyzstan depending on its context? Republic of Korea. South Korea is very unique and very different. However, it is Asian, and it's also some parts of culture, traditions are very close to our country. If you go back 1950s and 53, there was a civil war. The country divided into North and the South. GDP per capita was merely $73 US. Absolute poverty rate was 41%. And there was a huge disparity between urban and the rural areas. In this regard, there was a massive internal migration. However, government in the 60s and 70s first launched a 5-year economic development plan. They focused on industrialization and export-oriented policy, mostly textile. And after that, they 5-year economic plans, they have had money, government have money, and they saw that there is a huge disparity between urban and rural. In this regard, they have launched 70s, government launched Sema Lundong, where Se means new, Mal means village, Undong is development. In many literatures, you will see that Undong considered movement, however, it is development. Sema Undong means new village development, community development, and rural development, holistic approach to develop rural areas. if we see, it is historical model, it is historical development plan from government. Sema Lundong's theoretical framework, conceptual framework, they focused first of all public infrastructure. They improved public infrastructure, and when there is an improvement, there was attitudinal change. People saw improvement in their local area, and this positive mindset change led people that they can by themselves to develop. And in this approach, the quality of life, better living condition for rural residents. At the end, this holistic approach has known Sema Lundong focused on income increase. For this Sema Lundong new village development model, government spent 2.5% GDP for this for this program. Many academicians, many government officials I have interviewed when I studied in Korea 2 years. The whole 2 years we have just studied about this model, and many claims that government took leadership. President was a leader of this movement. First, it started from cement, 336. I didn't put, sorry, 336 packs of cement and iron bar given to villages. It was a free of charge, and the community utilized this cement and iron bar for their needs. What the community did is they gave their labor free of charge, and they utilized it for the betterment of the rural areas. And another academician argues that government leadership and the spirits of Lundong built social trust between local people and the government. And ideology of Sema Lundong, these three principles, many academicians say that three principles of new village movement, diligence, self-help, and cooperation, they became a values. They build ideology, nation building. They also consider it's nation building with these three principles: self-help, diligence, and cooperation. Community participation through Dure, working together, and Hangyak cooperation tradition, and the Confucianism culture of Koreans, which they participated voluntarily in this Sema Lundong new village movement. This table I will just skip. Table 2 is achievements of the 1 decade, 10 years, that the expansion of village roads, farm roads, small bridges, village halls, storehouses, housing improvement, and installing service systems, telephone lines, many others improved through 1 decade, in a rapid decade. In this picture shows that what was before Sema Lundong and after Sema Lundong, the huge improvement, road widening, and people here by themselves building bridges. And the right picture down, it's a total improvement of the villages and the rural areas. Modernization of kitchens and income increase, the farming. Nowadays, when Korea became donor country, they want to help for those who are in need for third world countries, because Korea knows how to help. And now they are launching global Sema Lundong. And this movement is now launching in 52 countries, including Kyrgyzstan also. And now I'm studying in Europe, and it is also very good opportunity for me to study European model, and which is appropriate to our country. LEADER also emerged as a rural development program. LEADER stands for links between rural economy and development actions. The original word is in French. Aim of the LEADER initiative: establish partnership through the formation of local action groups, LAGs, to mitigate disparities in diverse heterogeneous contexts of the European Union. This model is unique because of the LAGs, local action groups. It is a bottom-up approach based on a selection of best local development plans designed and developed by local action groups representing public-private partnership. The LAGs, local action groups, should include from public side and from private side and local association, local people. If they build their groups, then this leader will be launched in rural areas. A characteristic of the leader, the 7 principles of the leader, is Sema Lundong principles were diligence, self-help, and cooperation. And in this case, leader has 7 principles. It is area-based local development strategies, bottom-up elaboration and implementation of strategies, local public-private partnership, local action groups, integrated and multi-sectoral actions, innovation, cooperation, and networking. Leader is started in 1990s, and leader has 4 generations: leader 1, leader 2, leader plus, leader access. As you see, table 3 shows that first there was a 217 lakhs. In 2013, these from 217, it expanded to 1,400. And it has a 4 generations still continuing. This is my theoretical part based on documents and based on massive literature review. What I have found, it's very small. I know it. Now I am collecting data, but what I have found through comparison of Semal and leader. First of all, Sema Lundong was a government-led policy, and it was focused on poverty reduction, modernization of villages and income increase, rural development, nation building, and attitudinal change. Leader, from other side, it was mitigating their aim was mitigate disparities in rural areas in the member states and job creation and improve quality of life. My research question was, what is the local development schemes of these 2 models? Sema Lundong, new village development of its Korean model, it was a top-down, it was launched from government. However, people participated voluntarily in a bottom-up approach. We can also say integrated approach. Government guidelines, village participation, this diligence, self-help, cooperation help it to participate voluntarily from local residents. And what is the local development schemes of the leader program? It is bottom-up approach, building local partnerships, local initiatives. It's area-based, bottom-up, local action groups, integrated, innovation. It is seven principles. The main difference is Korean model is top-down. However, at the end, it was a bottom-up integrated model. And leader is also top-down because it is EU supranational level. But however, the regulation of leader, you have to have LAGs, local action groups. And that's why I think that it's not top-down, but it is a bottom-up approach. Government and governance, who are the main stakeholders? During when Sema Lundong launched, it was authoritarian regime. It's Park Chung-hee regime, highly centralized and military regime. Central government included all layers of government institution and officials and villagers and community residents. Another academician, another group of academicians says that in this Sema Lundong era, people forced to participate in Sema Lundong because it was authoritarian regime. In leader, we see democratic regime, decentralized, municipalities, private sector, local association or residents. They put the regulation, you have to build LAGs, otherwise there is no funding. That's a big differences of these two local it's the governance system. Local participation in Semalundong, full volunteer participation. There is a paradox. It was an authoritarian regime. However, people participated voluntarily, even it's forced or not forced. When it was a free of charge of cement, for example, the people voluntarily participated. And that's why I think that people voluntarily participated. And participation in the EU member states varies because passive in Eastern Europe were also post-socialist country, Hungary, Poland, and they have experienced collectivism, subordinates, and there was a very passive participation from local people. As I have also mentioned, Europe with communist heritage weak due to the sparsely populated in rural areas in Western Europe. Right now in Europe, there is a problem is aging. And
Aida,
now,
you have 3 minutes only.
Yeah, I am concluding. Now, last year, Prime Minister of Korea came and there was a launch of Meninayilim. It is My Village initiative. Government, from our government, there was a $1 million and Korea subsidized it with $3.5 million. 30 pilot villages included in this My Village program initiative. What they focus is our traditional method Ashar is applicable. And now I am doing a survey and I am interviewing this. Now, what the main thing is, this is my model where I think that based on the LAGs, local action groups, and based on the Korean model, we need to, in order to develop local economy, we have to have local stakeholders where ILOC, local government, self-government, and private sector community should integrate together because individual people has limited capacity. In this regard, three stakeholders should integrate to develop their own local area. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, Аида, очень интересно. Уже есть один вопрос, его задала Александра Филатова. Маша, если можно ей предоставить слово, чтобы она устно задала.
Я занимаюсь исследованием кыргызской диаспоры, и мой вопрос связан с этим. Заметили ли вы уже во время исследования, я так поняла, что вы только в начале field research, роль кыргызской диаспоры именно из-за рубежа для развития сел, из которых они являются выходцами? Спасибо.
No, the diaspora, I didn't include, I didn't touch time, sorry. I cannot answer for this question. Sorry.
Понятно. Спасибо большое. Еще если есть вопросы какие-то? Ну, пока люди думают, у нас еще есть время. Мой вопрос. Я заметил, что эти недешевые программы были и в Корее, и в Европе, какие-то миллиарды, соответственно, там.
Да,
как это применительно к Кыргызстану? Ну, я понимаю, что это такое топливо обязательно нужно, чтобы эти инициативы местного развития реализовывались. Реалистически, как вы думаете, что могло бы выступать в этом отношении? Спасибо.
I will answer in English. I think any investment to rural areas, especially remote areas, it's welcome. And now Korean people selected 30 pilot villages. The first year they focused on the infrastructure building. I came from today. I came from Butken, and the 10 villages from very remote areas. They have now built many bridges. Even now, the second phase of this pilot projects, now they are focusing on income increase. I think yes, I know what you say. I agree. The amount of the Semalundong was huge, 2.5–3% of GDP relocated for this project. In this case, 3.5 million. It is small, but it is something. What Korean people, this project focuses mental minds and change of the people, that we can also do something. We cannot rely on migrants or remittances. We can do something working together. I think any investor is welcome now. I think I believe as a professional in this area, I think people are doing something, and our mechanism is participate. Ashar is now reviving, and it has a new era, I think.
Спасибо. Я, может быть, комментарий просто сделаю еще такой, что вы, возможно, знаете, что в Кыргызстане есть такой механизм, как стимулирующие гранты из государственного бюджета. Смысл по-английски называется matching grants. Смысл состоит в том, что если местные сообщества мобилизовали какие-то собственные ресурсы, то республиканский бюджет им добавляет. И это именно там объявляется конкурс, ежегодно подаются заявки. Ну, там есть политический процесс, всегда есть политический процесс, когда есть бюджетные деньги, да. Но, тем не менее, если бы вы в своем исследовании нашли примеры в вашей зоне того, как пользовались люди этим инструментом, и если пользовались, то какие у них впечатления? А если не пользовались, то почему, может, вообще про него они знают или не знают? А если знают, то почему не воспользовались? Мне кажется, это была бы очень интересная эмпирическая информация, потому что понимаете, ну, Корея даст помощь, это хорошо, спасибо, но она не обязана, и это не обязательно устойчиво, да? А правительство Кыргызстана заинтересовано, и есть этот инструмент политический на самом деле. То есть это было понято там 20 лет назад уже. Этот инструмент давно существует в государственных финансах. Было бы очень интересно это узнать. Спасибо.
Спасибо.
Any other questions? Еще вопросы, пожалуйста, у участников? Ну, чтобы мы не теряли время, я предлагаю, если у кого-то вдогонку появятся какие-то вопросы, вы можете их туда написать. И, может быть, Аида ответит письменно, а может быть, будет еще время для того, чтобы устно ответить. По-любому не будем сейчас задерживаться. Спасибо большое, Аида, очень интересно. И позвольте передать слово Надиру, который расскажет другую историю, очень тоже интересную. Спасибо.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Yeah, thank you, Roman. I will take over here in English. I hope translators will do their best. So I'm sharing the screen, and while sharing it, let me briefly build up a story. So I'm reflecting to what previous presenter gave a presentation. So this is also a case from Central Asian agricultural rural settings, and it's also built on kind of grassroots movement, informal cooperation of farmers over water management. So this is a title, Determinants. It's an old title, Determinants of Farmers' Cooperation in Water Management in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And it's also talks about the monetary issues. Farmers, when they cooperate in water management, they're expected to make investments into irrigation infrastructure, either monetary directly or with labor, with their time efforts. So here's the work has been done with my colleagues, so with Abdusame and Tadjiev. There are several others to mention, like Zafar Kurbanov. And yes, so this presentation, I'm basically, it's a still ongoing work. It's many things to still to update. Recently, I received another set of comments from last week conferences, online conference also on Central Asia. So I hope today, either during the session or after that, I will get additional ones. Yeah, so let's go. So this is a picture from helicopter of urban, rural settings of Uzbekistan. It's near Aral Sea. You see these pictures with household plots in a far away, some fields where farmers cultivate different crops. You see that the fields are not homogeneous. There are differences in planting, in preparation. So this kind of settings would see in Central Asia landscape. But there is also hidden things, not related to physical infrastructure, things which many people also articulated this during this conference related to how people interact with each other. Yeah? So this is a presentation which I will drive here about people, namely farmers, how they interact with each other in water management, in dealing with the irrigation water. Yeah? And this is, we take it as a social dilemma. It's a big issue, water management. Yeah. And so I build the story, background, and then we go. So instead of presenting all determinants, social characteristics of farmer, economic characteristic, physical. I talk today only about social norms, in decision making, and then we build question around this. It's an interesting topic, how behavioral non-monetary attributes or characteristics of farmers affect the decision making. Then we take cross-country comparison. My colleague already early yesterday, exactly at this time, gave a presentation from the same project and introduced more or less to the settings of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. So I will repeat it again because some of you knew. And then I talk about, present briefly results and give some take-home messages from this. So let's go next slide. So the cooperation in water management presents itself a social dilemma. So everybody knows, especially in the post-Soviet Central Asian countries, when the central authority was dismantled, big collective farms and all water administrating bureaucracy has been distributed, given kind of to participatory transfer to water users. The social dilemma became obvious. You don't have a central coordinator overseeing, making overarching decisions. So farmer has to make decisions considering collective goods, individual benefits, but also collective benefits. Instead, what we observe when the situation tells if people do things together in agreement, things will work smoother. Instead, what we see is this clear social dilemma that people prefer their own interest at cost of group interest. It's not only in irrigation, it's everywhere, this kind of problems. And in these settings of water management, what it makes it quite interesting that this is so-called hybrid social dilemma. So there is not only consumption of water resources like in other problems, that people have to cooperate in consuming, in utilizing resources, but here it's also goes a cooperation required to make investments, to make proper investments, because, for instance, water pipe or irrigation canal, it's not owned by one farmer. It's costly. It has high costs, so it's also operated in a way that it covers larger territories where several farmers cultivate their crops. So we have this kind of hybrid social dilemma where there is this give-some dilemma. So farmers are expected to contribute, to participate in collection action, making investments into maintaining irrigation infrastructure, either by labor efforts or by financial donations, contributions, or so if they don't pull together sufficient resources, so their resources don't work. So there is also free ridership problem. Another problem is this take-some dilemma. So people have to comply to previously agreed rules. So they collectively make rules how to distribute water, who is doing what, when, how much, for which crops. So this kind of compliance in take-some dilemma, it's also important. So that is our hybrid social dilemma. So what we know from previous studies, I highlight here three. There are many, many studies, very different ones. Water is backbone of 1,000 irrigated areas of Central Asia. So here I would like to highlight three papers. First paper points at that farmers individually contribute. So they decide to cooperate. Their cooperation is higher when they trust to each other, to the government, to the administration. And basically this trust, if they have this trust, they are more likely to cooperate. Another another study done in more experimental settings also, which I also co-authors with my colleagues, Amirova, Iroda, and Martin Patrick. It tells that there is communication when farmers are allowed to communicate, talk to each other to make common decision, then cooperation is more likely. At the same time, the study shows that top-down penalties, they can negatively affect farmers' decision to contribute, to cooperate. Here was study in terms of contributing in irrigation water resources and withdrawing water. And finally, the third paper, which I want to highlight on the slide, it's a paper led by Ahmad Kamidov, another colleague from Germany. He basically, with his colleagues, they point that good management of water user groups, of water user associations is basically important. So not only top-down approach, but top-down in a way that this management has a better understanding of local settings, yeah? Has very good relationship with the farmers and clearly understands what is necessary, what kind of actions necessary to do. And this kind of top-down management can unite water users and make collective action happen. So here I would like to plug social norms. The studies, basically, that's an interesting aspect which we try to look through recently with colleagues. And in Central Asia, it's also, I think, with other social science disciplines, not economics, it's quite emerge already, kind of consolidated knowledge exists. So here we know that these studies basically state that social norms are very important and they basically guide human behavior. It's not only economic incentives, institutional settings, but one of important things that people reflect on what others think about them. So they're very much concerned when they're making decisions what other people do, opinion about other people's, but also they work under societal pressure, yeah? So they have to work in a conditions where they can be judged, yeah? That if they make improper decision, you know, labeled like non-cooperator. So here I put some pictures from Central Asian settings where you see this kind of norms of traditions where you festivals, different festivals, weddings, spring, Navruz festivals, or for instance, respect to elderly, yeah, has very strong influence on people's decision-making. Why these social norms is important? There is this emerging literature from psychological, economic studies, behavioral studies. So 3 of the papers which I find interesting to refer here are related to role of social norms in farmers' decisions to participate in environmental programs. So for instance, one paper states that farmers more likely to participate farmers who participate in agri-environmental schemes are more likely to consider the opinions of their neighbors, of the societies they live in, as important. Another paper states that it's very likely, or there is evidence that adoption of sustainable agricultural practices by farmers is related to existence of local public image, whether a person considers this local public image and status important. And finally, farmers make decisions to participate in environmental programs because they consider that this kind of they want to show how open they are, that they are willing to cooperate, so they want to signal their pro-sociality, and with this they want to gain some status, yeah, additional status benefits. So here I take this points and then say, so what do we know about social norms in farmers' decision to cooperate? Do they matter? As farmers basically who would like to cooperate, who cooperate, are they more concerned about their society opinions than other farmers who don't cooperate? Is there is role of local authority opinion in farmers' decision making? Yeah? Whether farmers' concerns what their top level management, local administration, AKIM, thinks about them, does it matter? And also, whether the reputation of water supply organization, of water user groups, whether farmers' opinion about the reputation of these water user groups is important for the decision making. So the study regions, we know this map, Central Asian countries, some borders there. So the data were collected in 2 provinces in 2019, last year, March, April, and covering 500 farms in Turkestan province, former Maktaral province of Kazakhstan, and then Samarkand province in Uzbekistan. And the study was done, it's a follow-up study from AgriChange project funded by Volkswagen Foundation in Germany, and then taken over within the newly emerging doctoral program on sustainable agricultural development in Central Asia, also funded by Volkswagen Stiftung. So the interesting part of this study is that, and as presented also yesterday by my colleagues, that we compare farmers' decision-making in two different institutional settings. First, it's a Kazakhstan, where we have something like more private land ownership possibility, yeah, and then long-term leases that people can have a longer horizon, longer visions compared to Uzbekistan, more or less. Yeah, uncertainties with land tenure contract, and then that state can one day reallocate the land, take it over, and give it to other farms. We have also different manner how the farm restructuring was arranged. You know, in Kazakhstan, reform started earlier, very quick, and then we have very small farms in the study area. In Kazakhstan, Turkestan, its average farm size is 6 hectares compared to the non-linear in non-linear settings, or in the settings of non-linear farm restructuring reforms in Uzbekistan, where farmers were first large collective farms were dismantled, and this reform was taken over by consolidation. And we have something like an average cotton growing farmers. It's the largest farm cohort in this Samarkand province. It's around 90 hectares. And then we have other farmers in average making around 35 hectares. We have also it's a dynamic process in Uzbekistan. We have new types of organization being introduced, like cotton textile clusters. So it's a developing, changing institutional settings. We have also land distribution, how it was done. It was distributed to in Kazakhstan, it was distributed to former farm workers, while in Uzbekistan, more like auctioning was promoted, where applicants were evaluated based on their skills, on their asset education. And then in Kazakhstan, South Kazakhstan, agriculture doesn't have that strategic point like as in Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, we know this very strong quite recently, until recently, cotton and wheat were considered strategic crops with very strong involvement of the government via promotion of production quota, land allocation, control of prices. And we have difference in terms of capital and input access, a lot of private players in the supply chain, while in Uzbekistan, it's agriculture now experiencing quite dramatic reforms, but still there is big presence of public organizations. Yeah. So descriptive statistics, again, what we have on average, what we say is that farmers in Kazakhstan have to rely on their own knowledge. In Uzbekistan, farmers are bigger, so they also hire different agronomists, crop experts, livestock experts, engineers, machinery repair. So there is different types of specialized labor force, while in Kazakhstan, smaller farms have to rely on more or less own knowledge. Yeah, cotton is quite strong in both settings. In Kazakhstan, farmers cultivate about half of their land under cotton. In Uzbekistan, interviewed farms on average in Samarkand province, 1/3. Not many farmers own irrigation pumps, so they rely on surface irrigation, which makes cooperation quite important. Cooperation in water management. So in Samarkand, farmers enjoy more fertile soils compared to more saline land in Turkestan. So let's talk about this water management things. Let's compare what we observed. So we asked farmers what kind of form of water management cooperation you participated previously, last year or previously. And then they would select with different options of like contributing to maintenance of irrigations, pump, of irrigation canal, cleaning canal. When the pump is broken, they would go and repair. And they had different types of answers, like I don't cooperate, that's obvious. But if I cooperate via only formally, or via informal agreements combined with hashar, so the voluntarily participation in labor efforts in collective work, and only hashar, or informal agreement. So there's kind of different answers they give. So what we see in Uzbekistan, farmers are more likely to cooperate in water management. So they're more likely to give something, invest their time or resources into irrigation system. And cooperation is in both settings, it's very informal. So mostly dominated by informal arrangements. Yeah? So there is no participation of local governments to formalize this cooperation, introduce new rules. Of course, in Kazakhstan, the share of farmers who responded that they cooperate is a bit higher than in Uzbekistan. In terms of take some cooperation, this take some social dilemma where farmers have to agree, comply to rules which they agreed previously with their other water users. Yeah, so we see here again, take some social dilemma in water distribution and in water monitoring. So monitoring other farmers doing distributing water. So we see that there is in Kazakhstan cooperation is quite collective in water distribution, but people take own individual decisions, more individualized decisions, not cooperative decisions in monitoring. The same with Uzbekistan. Yeah? So quite a lot of farmers still, they try to cooperate, make a collective decision, and then to develop this kind of rules for compliance, rules for distribution and monitoring.
Nodir, sorry, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, let's rush then. Okay, this is time preferences. That's farmers in Kazakhstan. They are more risk takers, and they prefer to make decisions quite quick. What we see here with the slides is in terms of social norms that farmers we see in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they different approach. In Kazakhstan, farmers consider more important opinions of their neighbors than of farmers, and then only of local authority. In Uzbekistan, it's other way around. Farmers are very much concerned about opinion of local authority and less concerned about opinion of their neighbors and relatives. In terms of trust to courts, we see that in Kazakhstan, farmers are very much trusting in courts to deal with the dispute with state authorities. Yes, for instance, big authorities which decide on continuation of farm, bankruptcy, while in Kazakhstan they don't trust courts. So I use simple problem model. We have this cooperation, non-cooperation, different version, give some cooperation in two different institutional settings and two different take some cooperation in water distribution and water monitoring. And what we see here, important that farmers in Kazakhstan, when they consider that farmers who consider that punishment, they are more likely to punish for unfair behavior. Other water users, similar in Uzbekistan, they're more likely to be in a group decision making in water distribution and water monitoring. Yeah? In terms of other slides, let me go about caring opinion of neighboring farmers, of relatives. It's also so farmers who care about opinion of their relatives, like these studies, 3 studies which I showed on farmers' participation in environmental programs, they're also positively associated with cooperation. So farmers who care about opinion about other farmers more likely to cooperate in different forms of water management. Yeah, while caring about public authorities' opinion works different way in Kazakhstan. So people who care about local authority opinions, they are less likely to cooperate, while in Uzbekistan, they basically say, okay, I respect the local governor. And those who respect the local governor, they are more likely to cooperate. So going to conclusion, given the time, and I think I took over too much in the beginning. So here we say that in more integrated market settings, like in Kazakhstan, where institutions function, reform started a bit earlier, much earlier, there is more, farmers find this cooperation a bit risky. So farmers who risk takers, they are more likely to take part in cooperation. And then the most important thing that social norms, this our analysis shows that social norms of respect to opinion of their neighbors, of their society is important for farmers to make decisions, so decisions to cooperate. However, opinion about public authority works different way. In Turkestan, if farmers respect public authority, they very much trust them, so they prefer individualization. They make individual decisions and don't cooperate in water management with other farmers. In Uzbekistan, farmers cooperate, those farmers who respect local authority. And so let's go here. So for policymakers, I think with this study, we would like to also to develop something interesting. So kind of that policymaking should not consider only top-down approach to promote or some new regulations, financial measures to promote collective action, cooperation in water management, but also should strongly rely on social norms and public opinion about farmers who cooperate, increase their status, go with different social comparison programs, where pointing at the farmers who as good ones, those to the farmers who cooperate, who contribute to management of irrigation infrastructure, follow the agreed water management rule. So here it's the same like what we observe, for instance, with the general voluntarily movements to fight with coronavirus crisis, when the public infrastructure organizations are not capable of managing. There is this role of people who would like to contribute as volunteers is quite important. Yeah, some countries also took a very advanced measures to promote the status about these people, to create something like to signal to the community this is the people who contribute, they're good ones, they're heroes at this time. So the same, I think this study also shows that there is a potential for this kind of developing public opinion about farmers who cooperate, that this kind of public opinions can also lead to better participation of farmers in water management. So that's it. Thank you. And quickly, since I'm a part of bigger institution here, not representing only myself, I would like to invite participants of this conference to apply to next year IAMO forum. We don't know if it will go online, maybe after vaccinations, there can be physical presence. So the next IAMO forum 2021 is on agri-food systems in the bioeconomy, to be taken in 7th, 9th June 2021 in Halle. You can find it on the Facebook, also in the IAMO website. If you find it topic relevant for your research or your research relevant to the conference topic, please apply. Okay, thank you, Roman.
Thank you very much. Большое спасибо. Очень интересно. Пожалуйста, если у кого-то есть вопросы, самое время сейчас их задать. Ну, скажите, пожалуйста, пока опять же люди думают, я, может быть, задам свой вопрос. Это на самом деле, вот мне бросилось в глаза различие между Узбекистаном и Казахстаном в ранжировании мнениях, чьи мнения очень важны и чьи мнения менее важны. Это следовало ожидать или это такой какой-то неожиданный, удивительный результат, с вашей точки зрения?
Да. Спасибо, Роман. Я продолжу тогда на русском языке.
Как вам удобно.
Да. Но я думаю, это ожидаемо. То есть вопросы полностью идентичны, перевод тоже мы проверили, что они полные послания, смысл этого вопроса передают и на казахском, и на русском, и на узбекском языках. И по нашему литература тоже показывает, что в Казахстане очень, люди более индивидуальны и более близко относятся, то есть мнение их, они оценивают, дают большую оценку мнению своих соседей и других фермеров, да, и меньше заботятся о том, что думает их аким, например, местная администрация. В Узбекистане именно среди фермеров, которых мы опросили, получается, в Самаркандской области, что фермеры, которые... То есть литература тоже показывает, что это мне нужно, наверное, тоже literature review немножко показать там, то, что фермеры очень большое внимание уделяют тому, что думает о них местная администрация. Да, это ожидаемо.
Спасибо. Я бы тоже я бы ожидал, да, но немножко скорее со ссылкой на то, о чем вы в начале своей презентации говорили, что земля кому принадлежит? Значит, в Казахстане это все-таки во многих случаях люди хозяева земли, а в Узбекистане они гораздо сильнее зависят именно от государственных решений. Соответственно, они, конечно, будут слушать тех, кто принимает, ну, очень существенные решения, да. То есть, поэтому как бы очень прагматическими может быть оказаться объяснение. Ну, конечно, так более как бы долгосрочные и глубже укорененные социальные нормы могут отличаться. Ну, может, я бы сказал, что здесь, что эндогенно, что нет, это отдельный вопрос для вас, на самом деле. Да. Может быть, в Казахстане такая структура землевладения, потому что там вообще общество по-другому построено. В Узбекистане не пошли на приватизацию земли, в Казахстане пошли, да, это может отражать какие-то очень долгосрочные вещи. Но я не специалист в этой сфере, но это очень интересно, мне кажется. Спасибо.
Да, спасибо.
Пожалуйста, еще если есть вопросы. Ну, я предлагаю ровно точно так же поступить, как мы с Аидой поступили. Она тем временем ведет переписку с некоторыми участниками, и это очень хороший способ. Если созреют вопросы, значит, вы их увидите, захотите, ответите письменно, не захотите, устно будет возможность еще ответить. Тогда, с вашего позволения, я передам слово нашему третьему докладчику. Спасибо большое, Надир. Очень-очень интересно. Ждем публикацию в какое-то время спустя. Мы обратили, я надеюсь, что все участники также обратили внимание на объявление относительно форума IAMO. Тем временем я передаю слово Мадине. Пожалуйста.
Добрый вечер, коллеги. Очень рада приветствовать вас. Я буду говорить на английском. У меня доклад на английском языке. Okay, so this study was done in cooperation of two universities. So my colleague Aigul Bemisheva from NARXOZ University and me from University of Central Asia, we did this study during the 2 years, and it's actually published at the book chapter in the Kazakhstan developmental journey book. And it's available for you to read. So why we decided to do this study? First of all, I moved to the small town, Tekli, that is actually a place selected for the University of Central Asian campus. And I was living there for 2 years. And that actually increased my interest to study the monotown policy and how it impacted on the Tekli and other post-mining towns. So since 2012, the government of Kazakhstan has adopted policies and allocated considerable budget transfers to develop to the development of monotowns or the mining towns. The purpose of our study was to provide a critical review of the Kazakhstan monotown policy and to provide change that's needed if the government wants monotowns to find their own sustainable economic development path. So according to the national strategy of Kazakhstan 2050, the country aims to join 30 of the most developed countries and increase the share of urban population up to 70%. It happened that among these so-called urban areas, we have not only large cities, but also small towns. And it was to mention here that 15% of so-called urban population of Kazakhstan live in these industrial or post-industrial towns. And if you look at the map, you can see that Tekli actually experienced a considerable growth comparable with the large cities. So it's very important to understand what is the role of these towns in national economic development. Kazakhstani mining towns, they are actually part of the Soviet legacy and outputs of the Soviet industrialization policy that include intensive development of extractive industries. And so during Soviet times, most of these towns, they were closed for visitors and they were artificially filled by labor because of the Soviet forced resettlement policy. Some of the dwellers were Germans, Greeks, Koreans, Russians, and other Slavic ethnics. And what was typical for these towns, their main provider of jobs and social infrastructure, as well as municipal utilities and even housing, was that the main industry. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and when Kazakhstan gained independence, the LiK industry actually lost their technological links with the Russian and other post-Soviet countries, and the Kazakh mining industries, they started to meet some challenge finding new markets to sell their products. And in general, there was a very intensive privatization policy implemented, and a lot of people who forcibly moved to these towns to live, they started to leave these towns. And in some cases, like in Tekeli, the collapse of the Soviet Union actually occurred simultaneously with the inevitable mine extraction, exhaustion, sorry. And so there was no lead anymore. And in 1996, due to the shortage of these polymetallic resources, in fact, the plant stopped to work and it shut down completely, and a lot of people lost their jobs. And of course, when people started to leave and there was no alternative economic activity, it all led to the deterioration of the living condition. And a lot of houses were abandoned and they started to demolish because they were not used anymore. So what the government tried to do, actually, the national governments of Kazakhstan started to react. In many cases, it tried to do something, but in fact, we have a lot of development problems of monotowns, which is still, actual for these towns. It's a demographic decline is one of the major development problems. And young people are leaving these towns because there is no job opportunity, and they're very low wage. In fact, the salaries, the average monthly salaries in monotowns mostly remain below the national level. Exception is only this so-called oil and gas towns where the oil and gas industry still operate. And also what is important here that there is a pretty high rate of self-employed people who are trying to engage in self-employment to survive. And the cities, in fact, are not ready for newcomers. As an example, since 2000, the government tried to fill these towns with the so-called ethnic repatriees coming back to their motherland, and they were moved to monotowns, but these people could not have housing, they could not get access to the local services or employment, and most of them, they actually moved to the large cities. Kazakhstan government in the early age, it actually always was, there was a attention of the national government to the monotowns, but the main focus was on supporting the industry and subsidizing this industry and trying to somehow subsidize activities. But in 2009, there was a global economic crisis, and there was a high, it has a high economic impact on all regions, especially monotowns, and because of their dependence on the industry. And there was a case in Zhanaozen town when people are not satisfied with their salaries and living conditions, went on a strike that led to violent conflict with the town authority and police and led to a death of people. So that was a kind of a very hot point when the government switched from so-called pro-industry policies toward the urban policy or monotown policy. In 2012, after this Zhanaozen incident, the national government approved the first monotown development program, and that program supplied to town authorities with so-called local planning document. So each monotown authority had to develop a comprehensive development plan that served as the new basis for planning of government to get financial support from the national and regional budget. So that tool aimed to support town governments with a kind of a planning document. But when we studied and looked at this monotown policy objectives, we did not find a lot of evidence that actually support that there were actions supporting economic diversification and small and medium entrepreneurship or stimulating labor mobility. We reviewed almost all these comprehensive development programs for 2 rounds, and also we interviewed people from 8 monotowns. What happened later in 2014, the monotown policy or monotown program became an integral part of the regional development program 2020. That was surprising. And what was interesting about this regional development program introduced a certain conflict between centralization and decentralization efforts, because it's aimed both at supporting the development of large urban agglomerations by attracting human capital from monotowns, but also continued to invite investing in the monotown development to stem the outflow of their population. So that was interesting. And we also looked at what were the investment strategies applied by the national and local governments. So town authorities had to propose investment projects supported by the main industries operating in monotowns, so-called anchor projects, and they were included in the national industrialization map. Initially, these investment projects had to be proposed by monotown, and it actually had to drive diversification by developing alternative activities to place the mining, to somehow replace this mining industry and combat growing unemployment. But even as some of the interviewed national government representatives said, none of the projects proposed really innovative or a new type of economic activities that could lead to diversification of local economy and create new source to drive local economy. Here on the slide, you can see a case of Zhanatas, where the Russian investor Eurohim, they tried actually to assist local government to develop new master plan, and they also invested in demolishing some, old structures in the town. But this is only one case, and most of the other cases where we have in LiK and other towns, industry simply invest in infrastructure that was shared with the town. So in fact, that infrastructure like roads and municipal utilities that they invested to renovate, the industries were using too. So they somehow combined their own benefits with this implementation of this program. And what was also interesting here that we asked some local companies, and they said that they were not properly engaged in the process, and is the process of selection of investment projects was not transparent. So a lot of key stakeholders, they were not informed about this. So also what was interesting about these programs that the monotowns received concrete top-down orders in terms of methodology and how to develop these comprehensive development plans, how to establish targets and indicators. And this delegation of planning was kind of positive change, but the national government instructions and indicators really were not customized to the town needs. And one of our recommendations was that there is a need to increase the number of indicators measuring environmental conditions and to introduce policy measures aiming to improve the town ecologies, because they're very polluted, and some of them are still being polluted by the industry. and planning that is more aligned to specific town development needs, to our opinion, can improve the implementation of nationally established actions to support monotowns. And so all this money won't be wasted, but they can actually support and strengthen the role of the local governments. Also, what we saw that a lot of money went to the so-called infrastructure projects, but there was no proper dialogue with the public and the private companies. So the infrastructure appeared in some places that were not desired, and in many cases was just correction of the master plans or general plans, but without support for further maintaining this infrastructure or really using this infrastructure for supporting some economic development activities. The national government attempted to introduce a bottom-up approach. In fact, they really tried to engage town administrations in this kind of selection and proposing investment projects and developing local plans. However, town authorities lacking experience, capacity, and they're constrained by single methodology imposed by the National Ministry of National Economy, they became unable to formulate workable development plans, and actually they could not really engage private sector actors in effective dialogue. So what we have and what we're trying to really advocate as a message to the national government, including Ministry of National Economy, that the town authorities, as a part of the lowest level of public administration, they really, this monotown policy, in fact, failed because this town authorities, they could not implement it. And they really could not tackle with real serious economic and environmental problems. And town authorities obtained some subsidies and started to be addicted to these new channels to build new urban infrastructure. But in fact, they did not receive adequate, annual or own budget allocations for maintaining this infrastructure. And some of the infrastructure, like roads, they already started to deteriorate because of the lack of maintenance. And lacking regulatory and taxation power, as well as adequate, managerial capacities, these town authorities could not engage with local businesses and local society and understand what they need and how they can participate in diversification of local economic development. Here on slide, you can see there's the overall structure of public administration and planning, and how these comprehensive plans for development were introduced, but in fact, they were not supported by any budget or fiscal, adjustment. So the monotown policy enabled towns to use this kind of national government transfers or public investment to rehabilitate infrastructure. But infrastructure was not sustainable investment because they, in fact, there is no link between how this infrastructural investment led to some economic developments. And also, we're not giving adequate incentives to be interested in the creation of favorable economic conditions on the local level. They were given incentives to ask more money for some investment projects, somehow lobbied or promoted by industries, but they were not giving opportunity to generate their own local revenue to reinvest in the future in town development. And we really think that the fiscal decentralization should be the strategic and well planned in case of these towns, considering that most towns do not have any economic resources to generate enough or sufficient local revenue to cover all development-related expenses. However, these subsidies or transfers, they have to be smart and they have to be channeled to those areas where the local community or local businesses really need support. When I was in Tekeli, this is our Tekeli office, the University of Central Asia, School of Professional Continuing Education, place, and we actually host a conference to understand if there is any demand on the local level and try to mobilize what are the local advantages and how we can build a new type of economic activities. And we were actually we could collect a lot of interesting ideas around touristic development, the role of digital technologies, and how actually some of the operating mining industries can be actually become ecologically or environmentally friendly and be linked with other industrial or non-industrial activities to create some clusters. And that was interesting, and we got support from the town administration. But as I said, there is a dependency on the regional level. So town administration communicated all this bottom-up initiative to the regional level, and unfortunately, we did not get any feedback or support. So, but what was interesting here also, what we discovered from so-called new generation of Kazakhs, or these ethnic repatriants who returned from China and Mongolia and other countries, they said that actually they would like to contribute to creative development of the town if they're allowed or they have access to infrastructure such as high-speed internet and some digital working places, so that they can actually be employed via internet, and also they can distantly contribute or create their digital entrepreneurial activities and can help actually to make the town visible. That was an interesting idea, and we included in our recommendation. Another recommendation, because we do not believe that, I mean, there is a decentralization tendency in Kazakhstan, and there are ongoing reforms that some rural, some village level authorities provide with small autonomy, but it of course requires considerable change on the constitutional level, and we do not believe that there will be a really serious decentralization in the coming years. However, when we studied the Canadian example, then there is a high centralization on the regional level, and towns are also not visible on the regional level, that they tried to solve this problem by networking. And so we think that in case of Kazakhstan, also these monotowns, that is just 27 towns, they can create a horizontal platform and can form so-called National Association of Towns. This idea was supported by the Minister of National Economy. They promised to think about this and maybe establish some kind of platform for networking. And this town association of Kazakhstani mining towns actually could stimulate some joint learning because they have similar problems, and maybe they can get some capacity building to increase the town authorities' capacities to understand how to drive local development, and also can create some opportunities for cooperation, not only inside the Kazakhstan and not only among the Kazakhstani towns, but also for cooperation with similar town authorities worldwide. This is all from my side. So I would like just to thank you for your attention. And here's a picture from Tekeli from one of our trip. Welcome to this nice city where cows are dominated in some part of the city.
Большое спасибо, Madina. Очень интересно. Ну, я опять же приглашаю всех наших участников задавать вопросы, обозначить свои интересы, может быть, устно задать или хотите написать. Тем временем, пока это происходит, у меня, как всегда, есть свои вопросы, если можно, пока что я воспользуюсь случаем. Во-первых, я извиняюсь за неполиткорректный вопрос, но вообще в политической дискуссии есть такая опция просто закрыть некоторые из этих городов. Некоторые из них жизнеспособны, нет дискуссии, да? Но некоторые там, даже, по-моему, в государственных документах было признано, что они менее перспективные. Просто, может быть, дешевле выйдет переселить людей? и все, достойные какие-то условия создать, чтобы они переехали, или такой темы вообще нету? И сразу, если можно, я вдогонку второй вопрос задам. То, что вы рассказываете про моногорода в Казахстане, это же в большой степени не только казахстанская тема, это и в соседних центральноазиатских странах тоже масса таких городов, только минус деньги, я бы сказал. В Казахстане все-таки центральный бюджет, имеет деньги, желает центральное правительство что-то с этой проблемой делать. Это большой плюс ему. Но что из этого можно извлечь для остальных стран? Ну, например, мне очень важный тезис, который вы выдвинули, это я то, что подхватил, наверное, есть больше, что capacity проблема есть, да, то есть даже если есть деньги, планирование, стратегический подход к развитию, это техническая вещь тоже, и это очень часто отсутствует. Вообще, это решаемая проблема, как вы думаете? Спасибо большое.
Айгуля, там, если хочешь ответить, ты как-то дай знать, но попробую я сначала ответить. По нашему опыту, ну, к сожалению, у нас вообще в начале идея была еще опросить некоторых людей из национального правительства, которые лоббируют интересы моногородов. Потому что у нас была теория, что выходцы из этих городов, когда попадают на национальный уровень, не забывают про свою родину и начинают лоббировать интересы своей родины, малой. Но у нас было там пару кейсов, но мы, к сожалению, не смогли людей этих опросить. Там у нас были реформы, и они некоторые ушли из своих должностей, и, в общем, не получилось. Но такая идея переселения была когда-то. Азиатский банк развития в 2004 году, когда делал предложение по развитию сельских территорий, они предлагали из депрессивных районов переселять население и закрывать. Но мы здесь столкнулись с такой вот социальной, как бы, нежеланием людей переезжать. Как бы они вообще устали от этого forced resettlement, и они, Азиатский банк развития повторно провел опросы среди людей, особенно вот в Западном Казахстане, вы знаете, у нас очень такая суровая климатические условия, и они решили там провести, и люди просто сказали, мы не хотим переезжать, это наша родина, мы здесь родились, здесь похоронены наши близкие, и если вы хотите что-то изменить, давайте нам создавайте новую деятельность, и мы будем здесь дальше жить. Но молодежь, конечно, вот более настроена, конечно, мобильно, а вот средний такой возраст, и особенно люди, которые родились в Советском Союзе, они вот не хотят переезжать. И поэтому, когда они не набрали такой называемый минимум, да, это, в принципе, с повестки дня сняли, идею переселения. Вот. Более того, наоборот, у нас сейчас активно переселяют с юга на север. Есть другая, как бы наложилась туда другая политика, что якобы север теряет население, молодежь, и нужно стимулировать переезд молодежи и людей с юга, потому что на юге у нас бум рождаемости, и их надо стимулировать переезжать в моногорода, которые на севере. Но здесь тоже не скажу, что мы смогли, успели доказать какую-то эмпирическую базу. Единственное, что где-то там были отклики от молодежи, что не были выполнены условия со стороны государства, люди приехали без теплой одежды, и в итоге они обратно вернулись, ну, через 1-2 года обратно на юг. Вот такие были кейсы. Айгульчика, вы хотели добавить что-то?
Да, наверное, добавлю. Здравствуйте, коллеги. Aigul Bemisheva, я ассоциированный профессор университета NARXOZ города Алматы. Я, наверное, добавлю к Мадине, к тем кейсам и о программах государственных по переселению молодежи, в частности, тот факт, что вопрос стоял не сколько в условиях, которые должно было создать государство, но плюс к этому огромный вопрос стоит в ассимиляции этой самой молодежи. При всей мобильности, при всей гибкости самой структуры молодежи у нас огромные расстояния, и вот эти вот расстояния, региональные расстояния, они отображаются на вот даже не этно, а вот на социальных структурах, этнографических особенностях той самой молодежи. И очень редко, почему у нас уже два потока этой самой государственной программы Серпын уже прошли, по переселению молодежи с юга на север уже два потока осуществились, деньги огромные бюджетные вложились, однако оба потока посчитались уже провальными именно из-за того, что не происходит никакой либо культурной ассимиляции. То есть люди с юга как ехали со своим бэкграундом южным, они не получают никакой ассимиляции, этим же бэкграундом они там обживаются, либо если не обживаются, то едут обратно к себе на юг. Вот, по поводу Тикили и других городов, те города, мы видели несколько городов в рамках этого проекта, нашей инициативной темы, молодежь возвращается в города, действительно, молодежь возвращается, и даже вот сейчас во время карантина, вот с весны этого года, огромное количество молодых людей уехало обратно в свои моногорода, в свои малые города, поскольку и в городе стало сложнее с работой, и появилась благодаря цифровизации, это тоже наша одна из инициативных тем, благодаря цифровизации, развитию цифровых навыков, появилось много возможностей, появилось больше возможностей трудоустраиваться уже у себя в родных местах. Спасибо.
Понятно. Спасибо большое. Bernard, I noticed you would like to ask a question, please.
Hello, Madina. Hello, Roman. Hello, other colleagues. Nice to see you. Congratulations, Madina. Very interesting. I always wanted to hear your story about Tekeli, who I had the chance to visit with you. Lots of literature exists in France, Germany and Belgium, when in the 60s and the 70s, the coal mining activities were terminated. So there's a lot to do there, a lot of cases also in East Germany and other ex-Soviet bloc countries that, what I would find interesting is to understand what the skills are that can act as a bridge between the past and the present, or the future, shall I say. And not only the skills, the technical skills, but also the social capital, right? To what extent are these people who live there attached to their place? To what extent do they see that this is their place for the future to come, and it was their place in the past, that they're not just people that were just parachuted there? And so if you have this social capital, if you can make an analysis of those invisible structures, informal structures, which is really this social capital, and then you combine this with the skills analysis, and perhaps we can have a meaningful study on what the future can hold for Tekeli and its people. I would find this a very interesting study. As you know, we've discussed it in the past. And then perhaps also having a look at what the UCA can do, could do there, is another issue. And there we have, of course, the case of Horok, which is going to be very useful. So, I mean, I don't have a specific question. There's perhaps just a comment that I would like to make. So the skills, perhaps you can answer that. Yes, what skills, what stock of skills do we have there? And what does it say about the future? Thank you so much.
So first of all, I just want to mention that there is a high the past dependency. As we said, these towns, they were isolated from the region. So in the past, they were closed towns. To access these towns, you had to get a special permission from the Ministry of Defense or from the Ministry of Industrial Development of the Soviet Union. And these people, they were living in like in an island. So they were not really well interact with other regional dwellers. And also when in 1990s, for example, this Tekeli town was 95% of the population were Slavic. And only today we have 50-50. And so I would say that it's hard to identify the local culture, because now this local, it's in interaction of so-called this Slavic ethnics that created their own vision of this small town. plus ethnic repatriates, native Kazakhs coming back from China and Mongolia, creating their own enclaves, yeah, some kind of social communities that kind of halal community. They do not interact with others. And also there's some Kazakhs from the region who are filling the local government and etc. But of course, when we did this conference in Tekeli, we invited some archaeologists and we invited some historians, and they said that this town was a part of the Silk Way, and definitely there should be some links. But we discovered during the interviews that it's really hard. These holders of these skills, they are too old and they're disappearing from the town. So it can be late. If we do not right now do the study, it can be late to do something. It's one thing. And the second thing is that if we take some social patterns, what we discovered that the natural, so as you know, the mining towns mostly located in the beautiful mountain areas, yeah. And so there are some nature-driven also socialization when the young people propose some initiatives. For example, in Tekeli, they have a unique school for hiking and for climbing, only for teenagers, for children. And that was proposed, and it's actually was accepted as a part of this Monotown policy initiative. And this is one unique example of many. But if we look at the town administration or other key stakeholders, they are so dependent from the industry. They will always complain about, oh, nothing can happen in this town because there is no industry anymore. And they try to reinvest into industry and pollute the town again where there is no future. So in this tension, unfortunately, there are only two ways. One way, if we really find some funding to do study ourselves, because the regional government is only attracted when we talk about some touristic destination, and they do not really pay enough attention to what kind of skills required to support these economic activities. For example, we wanted to have a big touristic forum, regional forum in Tekeli, but at the end they decided to do this in administrative center because they couldn't understand that this local community needs some inspiration from the regional level to go. So there is a potential, but people are afraid, and the key stakeholder, even the business representatives, they say, we are about to survive, so why should we think about overall economic development of the town or investment in skills, or as you said, identifying our roots? We don't have actually time and capacity to do this. If there is a budget, I think the potential future for this, if we really get a budget at the local level, and there are big discussions around this, that they should allocate the budget and relieve these national constraints in terms of methodology and instructions how to use the budget. That's, I think, only opportunity. Okay, thank you. I think we're running out of time.
Yes, that's exactly was my point. I'm very sorry. It's exciting discussion, but you know how to connect to each other, so you can continue offline. Unless somebody has really a burning question or comment, I would like to close the session. Большое спасибо всем панелистам, большое спасибо Аида, Nodir, Madina, спасибо Aigul за участие в дискуссии. Спасибо всем участникам, слушателям. Я считаю, что состоялась весьма содержательная, интересная дискуссия, которая релевантна, охватывала разные страны, но релевантна для всех стран в нашем регионе. Ну, ждем пейперов или читаем те пейперы, которые уже опубликованы. На этой оптимистической ноте закрываем нашу конференцию. Большое вам всем спасибо. И через год, 27-28 октября 2021 года, надеюсь, в очном режиме, но может быть и в онлайн-режиме, как жизнь покажет, так или иначе мы с вами встретимся снова. Всего вам доброго. До свидания. Спасибо большое.